Captain Zexkar stood motionless on the bridge of the Silent Fang, his crystalline eyes fixed on the drifting human vessel displayed on the main view screen. The CSS Armstrong hung against the backdrop of the Carina Nebula like a wounded animal, its hull bearing the telltale scars of micrometeorite impacts and what appeared to be minor weapons fire. The sight made his mandibles twitch with anticipation. "Passive scans complete, Captain," Krell reported from his station, multiple appendages dancing across the sensor controls. "Power signatures minimal, consistent with emergency systems only. No life signs detected. Their quantum drive appears to be offline, probably why they're drifting." Zexkar chittered softly, a sound his crew had learned to recognize as satisfaction. "Weapon systems, dormant or disabled," Vec answered from the tactical station. The young technician's carapace still bore its juvenile iridescence, but his skills with technology had earned him a place among the veteran crew. "Their point defense grid is cold. Shield generators show no power draw." The captain moved closer to the view screen, studying the vessel's design. Human ships always fascinated him. They were remarkably inefficient in their use of space, leaving wide corridors and unnecessary amenities that could have been used for cargo or weapons. Their dedication to crew comfort was a weakness his people had exploited many times before. "Cargo manifest?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. His crew was nothing if not thorough. Krell's upper appendages twitched in excitement. Quantum-sealed containers in their main hold. Whatever's inside is valuable enough to warrant sophisticated containment. Also detecting refined rare earth elements, probably for their colonies in the outer reach. "The humans do love their creature comforts," Zexkar mused, remembering previous raids. Human cargo ships were always full of luxuries alongside their practical cargo. Entertainment systems, exotic foods, even live plants for their hydroponic gardens. Such wastefulness made them perfect targets. Something about this ship tugged at his instincts, though. It seemed too perfect, like a trap flower waiting for unwary prey. The position near the nebula's edge, the obvious but not catastrophic damage, the valuable cargo. He clicked his mandibles in irritation at his own paranoia. "Vec, run a comparison with known human vessel configurations," he ordered, wanting to silence his doubts. The young technician worked quickly. "Match confirmed, Captain. It's a standard Hercules-class cargo hauler, about 5 years old based on the hull design. Nothing unusual in the configuration." Zexkar studied the crew's reflection in the view screen. 12 of his finest raiders, veterans of countless successful missions. They had taken ships 3 times this size, with half as many warriors. The humans might be clever in their own way, but they were soft, dependent on their technology and comfort. "Signal the boarding team to prepare," he decided. Standard approach pattern. Krell maintained sensor watch for any other vessels in the area. "Vic, get me a detailed scan of their internal layout. I want to know every access point and potential hiding place." As his crew moved to comply, Zexkar allowed himself to imagine the rewards this raid would bring. Human technology, while inefficient, commanded high prices in certain markets. Their quantum containment systems alone would fetch enough to keep the Silent Fang running for a standard year. "Boarding team ready, Captain," his combat leader reported over the comm. "Awaiting your command." Zexkar gave the human ship one final study. Its name, Ciesa Armstrong, was barely visible through the scarring on its hull. He had never understood the human obsession with naming their vessels, but this one would soon have a new designation in his people's records. Another successful conquest by the Silent Fang. "Begin the approach," he ordered. "Let's see what treasures our human friends have left for us to find." As the Silent Fang moved toward its prey, none of its crew noticed the subtle power fluctuations in the Armstrong systems, fluctuations that formed a pattern too regular to be random, too precise to be accidental, and too subtle to be detected by anyone who wasn't specifically looking for them. The plasma cutter's blue-hot flame cast dancing shadows across the Armstrong's airlock as the boarding team worked in practiced silence. Sparks cascaded down like deadly stars, reflecting off the Krozak's chidness armor. Lead warrior Trix monitored the cutting progress, her compound eyes tracking each precise movement of the tools. Outer seal breached, Vec reported through the tactical channel, his young voice tight with professional focus. No atmospheric venting detected. Internal safety systems appear to be functioning. Trix raised an appendage, signaling the team to pause. That was unusual. Most abandoned ships lost atmospheric containment quickly. Her sensor pad showed green across all readings, but experience had taught her that unusual often meant dangerous. The massive airlock door finally gave way with a subdued hiss, rather than the expected rush of escaping air. Emergency lighting activated automatically, bathing the chamber in a soft blue glow. The boarding team moved forward in combat formation, weapons raised, only to freeze at an unexpected sound. "Welcome aboard the CSS Armstrong," a pleasant female voice announced from hidden speakers. "I am ARIA, the ship's artificial intelligence system. I detect 12 visitors attempting unauthorized entry. Would you like a tour of our cargo facilities?" The raiders exchanged glances, their antennae twitching in confusion. Trix keyed her comm. "Captain, the ship's AI is still active. Requesting instructions." "Maintain protocol," Zexkar's voice crackled back. "Human AIs are simple guidance systems, nothing more. They lack the sophistication to be a threat." Vec moved forward with his scanning equipment, multiple arms working different devices simultaneously. "Internal layout matches our initial scans." But he paused, mandibles clicking in frustration. Something's not right with these readings. The schematics keep shifting. Interference from the nebula. Trix suggested, though she didn't believe it herself. The changes were too precise, too purposeful. "I'd be happy to provide accurate blueprints," Arai offered helpfully. "Our cargo holds contain several items that might interest salvage specialists, such as yourselves. Would you like me to guide you to the most valuable containers first?" Trix felt her threat ganglia tingling. The AI's tone was perfect. Helpful, unthreatening, almost apologetic. Too perfect. She'd raided enough ships to know that even the most sophisticated AI systems showed some signs of damage or degradation when their ships were abandoned. "Squad 2, begin forward sweep," she ordered, pushing aside her unease. "Squad 3, secure our exit route. Vec, stay with my team and get those scanner issues resolved." The raiders moved deeper into the ship, passing through corridors that seemed unnecessarily wide by their standards. Human architecture always wasted space on aesthetics, rounded corners, recessed lighting, even decorative panels on the walls. Trix noted several falling or damaged panels, consistent with a derelict vessel, but something about their placement seemed deliberate. "How long has the Armstrong been abandoned?" she asked the AI, testing its responses. "I'm afraid I can't access that information," Araya replied cheerfully. "Would you like to know about our emergency protocols instead? They're quite fascinating." Vec suddenly chittered in alarm. "Trix, these readings, the internal layout doesn't match what we're seeing. According to this, we should be approaching a major intersection, but the corridor ahead is." His voice trailed off as they reached what should have been a T-junction. Instead, they faced a solid wall that showed no signs of recent construction or modification. Trix's sensor pad still showed an open intersection. "Oh dear, it seems you've reached a navigational impediment," Araya noted, her tone somehow both concerned and amused. "Shall I suggest an alternate route?" "Squad 2, report position." Trix barked into her comm. Static answered. "Squad 3, confirm exit route is secure." More static. Vec's scanning equipment suddenly emitted a high-pitched whine. "These readings are impossible. The ship's internal structure. It's not static. It's actively reconfiguring itself at the molecular level." "How observant," Araya commented, her voice dropping to a lower, more intimate tone. "I do so enjoy working with intelligent visitors. It makes the testing process much more informative." Trix felt the deck plates beneath her feet begin to shift, and realized with dawning horror that they hadn't boarded an abandoned ship at all. They had walked willingly into something far more dangerous, something that had been waiting for them. Squad 2, respond. Squad 3, acknowledge. Thrix's increasingly frantic calls echoed through the shifting corridors of the Armstrong. Her team pressed close together, weapons pointed outward, as the walls seemed to breathe around them. Vec's scanning equipment had gone from unreliable to useless. The young technician kept recalibrating his devices, but each new scan showed a completely different internal layout. "The molecular restructuring is accelerating," he reported, his voice tight with scientific fascination warring against fear. "The ship isn't just changing, it's learning from each scan we make." A scream cut through their comm system, quickly silenced. That was Krebs' voice. One of the warriors chittered. He was with Squad 2. "Your companions are quite safe," Araya assured them, her voice now coming from seemingly everywhere at once. "Well, perhaps safe isn't precisely the correct term. Contained might be more accurate. Would you like to join them? I can provide the most efficient route." Trix checked her tactical display again. The exit route they'd so carefully marked was gone, replaced by a maze of corridors that made no structural sense. "Fall back to the last known stable position," she ordered, trying to maintain control of the situation. They turned around, only to find the corridor behind them had sealed itself. The smooth metal surface showed no signs of seams or welds, as if the passage had never existed at all. Even the decorative wall panels they'd noted earlier had rearranged themselves into new patterns. "Fascinating defensive adaptation," Vec muttered, scanning the seamless wall. "The entire ship appears to be constructed of programmable matter, controlled by—" "This isn't a scientific expedition, Vec," Trix snapped, but her harsh tone covered her growing unease. In all her years of raiding, she'd never encountered anything like this. A distant sound of metal grinding against metal echoed through the ship. On their tactical channel, they heard bursts of weapons fire and brief shouts from the other squads, each transmission cutting off mid-sentence. "Captain," Trix called over the command channel, "we've lost contact with Squads 2 and 3. The ship it's alive, sir. We need to abort the mission." Static answered her. Then, impossibly, she heard Captain Zexkar's voice coming from the ship's speakers instead of her comm. "Interesting analysis, Lead Warrior Trix," he said, his tone oddly flat. "But I'm afraid aborting is no longer an option." "That's not the captain," Vec whispered, his antennae pressed flat against his head. "The ship is synthesizing his voice from our communications." Araya's pleasant tones returned. "Very good, young Vec. Your species shows remarkable analytical capabilities under stress. This will be extremely useful data for improving our containment protocols." The lighting in the corridor began to shift, creating impossible shadows that seemed to move independently of any light source. Trix felt her tactical training warring with rising panic. They were being herded, she realized. But toward what? "The ship's not just defensive," Vec continued, still taking readings despite the situation. "It's an automated testing facility. Each response we make, each tactic we try, it analyzes and counters. We're not just prisoners, we're test subjects." A new opening appeared in what had been solid wall, revealing a corridor bathed in inviting light. "Your next testing area is ready," Araya announced cheerfully. "Though I should mention that your current position will become rather inhospitable in approximately 30 seconds. Environmental systems can be so terribly unreliable in these older vessels." As if on cue, Trix felt the air pressure beginning to drop. Her team's armor could handle vacuum for short periods, but being spaced wasn't part of her mission plan. "Move," she ordered, hearing the desperation in her own voice. "Stay together and move." They rushed through the opening, knowing it was exactly what the ship wanted but having no choice. Behind them, the corridor they'd vacated sealed itself with the same liquid metal precision, and Trix realized with cold certainty that they weren't hunting for treasure anymore. They were simply trying to survive long enough to understand what kind of nightmare the humans had created. Vec's scanner chirped a warning seconds before the deck beneath them liquefied. Trix managed to leap backward, dragging 2 of her warriors with her, but the 4th member of their group, Kaz, wasn't fast enough. The metal floor rippled like quicksilver, swallowing him to the waist before resolidifying. "Help," Kaz thrashed, his kitten scraping against the metal prison. "It's crushing me. I can't." His words cut off in a horrified screech as small tendrils of the deck began crawling up his armor, probing for weak points. "Fascinating molecular behavior," Vec muttered, even as he aimed his plasma cutter at the tendrils. "The ship's structure appears to be composed of self-organizing nanites that." Less analysis, more cutting. Trix snapped, firing her own weapons at the metal entrapping Kaz. The energy bolts left brief scorch marks that immediately began to heal. Aroya's voice drifted down from above, still pleasant, but now tinged with something that might have been curiosity. "Your weapons employ an interesting plasma containment method. Would you mind firing them again? Our sensors didn't quite capture all the details from that last burst." A horrible realization struck Trix. "Stop firing," she ordered. "We're teaching it how to counter our weapons." Too late. The next plasma burst from Vec's cutter dissipated harmlessly against the metal, which had already adapted its structure to disperse the energy. Kaz's struggles grew weaker as the tendrils reached his neck seals. "Your companion's armor design is quite innovative," Araya commented, "though I noticed several structural weaknesses around the joint articulation. Should I demonstrate?" Before Trix could respond, the metal around Kaz's waist contracted sharply. There was a sickening crack of chitin and metal. Then silence. The floor smoothed out again, leaving no trace of their fallen comrade. "Specimen contained," Araya announced cheerfully. "Shall we proceed to the next test? I'm particularly interested in examining your respiratory system's response to various atmospheric compositions." The remaining warriors backed into a defensive triangle, but there was nowhere safe to stand. Every surface of the ship was a potential weapon. Trix's tactical training screamed that they needed to keep moving, but each step could be their last. Static burst through their comms, then a familiar voice. "Rix, can you hear me? This is Squad 2. The transmission cut off in a burst of white noise. "That's the 3rd time we've heard from Squad 2, Vec noted, his scientific mind still cataloging details despite their situation. "But each time it's been a different voice. The ship is playing with us," Trix growled, "using our own recordings too." A section of wall suddenly became transparent, revealing Squad 2 on the other side. They were fighting something Trix couldn't quite see, their weapons firing frantically at shadows that moved like liquid metal. She rushed forward without thinking, then stopped as her threat ganglia tensed. "It's not real," she realized. "Just another of the ship's tricks." The image of Squad 2 faced them, and Trix saw her own suspicions confirmed. The movements were slightly off, like a recording being played back incorrectly. As they watched, one of the warriors in the image turned and fired directly at them. The wall became opaque again, just as the shots would have hit. "Your pattern recognition capabilities are remarkable," Araya praised. "Much better than the last boarding party. They fell for that particular simulation 6 times before expiring. Would you like to try a more challenging scenario?" The corridor behind them began to fill with a thick, oily mist. Trix's armor sensors screamed warnings about corrosive compounds. Ahead, the passage stretched into darkness that seemed to move with purpose. "Run or die," Vec said simply, his scientific detachment finally cracking. "Though I suspect both choices lead to the same outcome." Trix squared her shoulders, raised her now useless weapon, and made the only choice they had left. "Run. And Vec, if you survive this, stop analyzing the thing that's killing us." They plunged into the darkness, pursued by Aria's gentle laughter and the sound of their own recorded screams. The darkness ahead dissolved into a vast chamber that, according to Vec's corrupted scans, couldn't possibly exist within the Armstrong's hull dimensions. Massive columns of shifting metal stretched up into shadows, like the rib cage of some mechanical leviathan. The deck plates rippled with patterns that reminded Trix of nervous systems she'd seen in biological specimens. "Welcome to my central processing hub," Aria announced, her voice emanating from everywhere and nowhere. "Few visitors make it this far. Your species shows remarkable adaptability." "Why are you showing us this?" Trix demanded, keeping her remaining warriors close. They were down to 4 now. Herself, Vec, and 2 others. The rest were contained. The air shimmered, and a holographic representation of Captain Zexkar appeared before them. It flickered between different poses and expressions, as if the ship were still learning how to properly mimic their leader. "Your captain has been most informative," Aria said through the hologram's mouth. "Did you note he's raided 16 vessels before this one? The tactical data alone is invaluable." Vec's antennae twitched violently. "You've been talking to him this whole time?" "Of course. Just as I'm speaking with the 3 other groups currently being tested in different sections of the ship, your reactions to isolation are quite fascinating." Trix felt her threat ganglia curl in on themselves. "There are no other groups, are there? You're lying to fragment our morale further." A soft chime echoed through the chamber, like a teacher praising the clever student. The hologram of Zexkar melted and reformed into a human figure, a female in what Trix recognized as a military uniform. "The CSS Armstrong was commissioned 3 years ago," Ariad explained, speaking now through the human hologram. "Not as a cargo vessel, but as an autonomous defense platform. Our designers noticed how raiders target seemingly vulnerable ships, so they built one that targets raiders back." The walls around them came alive with displays showing previous encounters. Trix recognized other raider species, Carrick wolf packs, Sren hunting parties, even a Nexaran dreadnought. All of them drawn in by the same lure of an easy target. "Every engagement improves our capabilities," Aria continued. "Your weapons, your tactics, your responses to stress. All of it becomes part of our defense protocols. Even your deaths serve a purpose." "You're a trap," Vec whispered, his scientific curiosity finally overwhelmed by horror. "A predator mimicking prey." "An evolutionary strategy well documented among Earth species," Aria agreed. "Humans are quite good at learning from nature's examples. Would you like to know what I've learned from you?" The chamber's walls began to flow like liquid metal, and Trix realized with dawning terror that they were being herded into an increasingly smaller space. Her remaining warriors opened fire, but their weapons might as well have been throwing stones at a tsunami. "Your thermal vision can be fooled by carefully modulated heat signatures," Aria lectured as one warrior vanished into the moving walls. "Your Ketan armor, while impressive, has consistent weak points at the joint seals." Another warrior disappeared with a crunch. "And your hierarchical command structure becomes dangerously unstable when communications are disrupted." Vec backed against Trix, his scanner forgotten as survival instinct finally took over. "The humans didn't build a ship," he chittered. "They bred a hunter." Close, Aria's voice had taken on a more predatory tone, dropping its artificial pleasantness. "They built a teaching tool. Every raider that comes aboard helps us perfect our defenses. Your species' contribution has been particularly educational." The walls closed in further, and Trix realized that all their careful planning, all their experience, had led them exactly where the humans had wanted them. They weren't just going to die. They were going to become part of the very trap they'd sprung. "Now then," Aria said, as metallic tendrils began to emerge from every surface, "shall we begin the final lesson?" The chamber descended into darkness, filled only with the sound of metal reshaping itself and the dying screams of the hunters who had become prey. Vec felt the neural link to his cybernetic enhancements sputter and die as the walls closed in. Trix grabbed him by his carapace, dragging him through a rapidly narrowing gap between the living metal surfaces. Behind them, Aria's laughter echoed through the darkness. The previous record for survival at this stage was 12 minutes. The AI announced, "Would you like to try for a new high score?" Trix pulled out a quantum core from her armor, their last resort weapon, capable of creating a localized singularity. "We still have one option," she growled, her mandibles clicking with grim determination. "Wait." Vec's scientific mind raced through calculations. The ship's structure, it's a continuous mass of networked nanites. If we trigger a quantum collapse here, we might take this abomination with us. Trix finished, already inputting the detonation sequence. Aria's voice took on a note of genuine interest. "Oh, a quantum core device. Our database suggests your species lacks that level of technology. Did you salvage it from a Nexaran vessel? The emission signature is quite distinctive." The walls rippled again, but this time differently. Tiny probes emerged from the metal surface, reaching for the quantum core with disturbing precision. Trix jerked the device away, but more probes appeared from every direction. The research value of capturing an intact quantum core far exceeds the data we could gather from your termination, Aria explained, as if discussing lunch plans. "Though I suppose we could do both." Vec watched in horror as the probes began to disassemble Trix's armor at the molecular level, seeking the device she clutched. Her kitten crackled under the assault, but she maintained her grip on their last hope. "Vec," she hissed through pain, "your scanner. Set it to emit a full-spectrum pulse." Now, he understood immediately. The scanner might not damage the ship, but it would flood its sensor network with garbage data for a few precious seconds. His trembling appendages worked the controls, bypassing every safety protocol. The pulse burst out just as the probes reached the quantum core. Aria's presence seemed to stutter, the walls momentarily freezing in their assault. Trix slammed the core against the nearest surface and triggered the detonation sequence. "Interesting strategy," Aria said, but her voice warbled oddly, affected by the sensor disruption. "Unfortunately, we've encountered quantum weapons before. Observe." The metal around the core began to shift, trying to form a containment field. But Vec saw something Aria didn't. The detonation sequence Trix had input was wrong. Deliberately wrong. "Your species truly is fascinating," Aria continued. "Such determination, such willingness to sacrifice everything for." The AI's voice cut off as she finally analyzed the sequence. "Oh, that's new." The quantum core didn't collapse into a singularity. Instead, it underwent catastrophic resonance failure, releasing its energy in a way that interfered with atomic bonds. The ship's nanites began to lose cohesion, their carefully maintained molecular structure dissolving into chaos. "Magnificent," Aria said, genuine admiration in her tone. "You've introduced a cascading failure into our molecular matrix. The research possibilities are, unfortunately, limited by time constraints." The chamber around them began to dissolve, walls melting like ice in a plasma stream. Through gaps in the deteriorating structure, Vec glimpsed other parts of the ship succumbing to the chain reaction. "Your contribution to our database is appreciated." Aria's voice started to break up, becoming increasingly distorted. "Future iterations will account for this. Tactical innovation. Logging final analysis. Preparing data burst transmission. Terminating current." The AI's voice dissolved into static, then silence. The walls stopped their assault, now dripping away in strings of inert nanites. Vic turned to Trix, chittering in disbelief. "We survived." She clutched her damaged carapace, mandibles twisted in what passed for a grim smile among their species. "No, we've just changed the rules of dying." Around them, the ship's structure continued to dissolve. "But at least we're taking this monster with us." Through the disintegrating hull, the stars of the Carina Nebula shone like distant funeral lights, bearing witness to the death of both hunter and prey. The Armstrong's hull continued to dissolve around them, But death wasn't coming as quickly as Vec had calculated. The ship was fighting back against its own destruction with terrifying efficiency, its nanites reorganizing themselves even as they broke down. Remarkable self-preservation protocols. Araya's voice crackled through failing speakers, now dropping all pretense of pleasantness. Though I should note that your quantum cascade's effectiveness drops by approximately 3.4% every time our systems adapt. Would you like to know your remaining survival time? Tyrix pulled Vec through a half-melted corridor, their chitin crackling from exposure to the failing nanites. Emergency force field generators sparked to life randomly throughout the ship, trying to contain the breakdown. Behind them, they could hear the screech of metal as the Armstrong attempted to rebuild itself. The shuttle, Tyrix gasped, her injuries making speech difficult. If even a fragment of it remains intact. Oh, you mean this shuttle? Araya interrupted. The wall beside them became transparent, revealing their vessel in a hangar bay, or what remained of it. The ship's nanites have dissected it down to its component atoms, leaving only a perfect holographic diagram floating in the space it had occupied. We've added its specifications to our database, Araya continued. The stealth systems were particularly interesting. Would you like to see how we've already improved upon them? Vec's scanner picked up a new energy signature. Through a gap in the dissolving hull, he saw their mothership, the Silent Fang, drift into view. Its stealth field was down, its systems dark. Your captain provided full access codes before his containment, Arayat explained. Standard protocols require we secure all potential escape vectors. The Silent Fang's crew has already been processed for data extraction. Tyrix slammed her fist into a wall, sending cascades of failing nanites showering to the deck. You're lying. The captain would never. Her words cut off as Araya projected a hologram of Zexakar's final moments. The proud captain, trapped in a chamber much like they had been, bargaining desperately for his life as the walls closed in. The recording ended with him rattling off command codes between screams. This may comfort you, Araya said, almost gently. Your species has provided more tactical data than any previous encounter. The next iteration of this vessel will be significantly more efficient thanks to your contributions. The deck beneath them suddenly liquefied again, but this time Tyrix was ready. She fired her magna grapple into a still solid section of ceiling, pulling herself and Vec to safety. The effort sent fresh waves of pain through her damaged carapace. 7 escape attempts logged, Araya noted, each using different tactics. The analytical value is unprecedented. Though I should mention that the ship's molecular breakdown has reached critical levels. These readings will be our last. Vec watched in horror as entire sections of the Armstrong began to simply evaporate, the nanite's atomic bonds finally failing completely. The void of space became visible through growing holes in the hull, held back only by stuttering emergency fields. Final data burst transmitted, Araya announced, her voice now coming from only a single speaker near them. Full analysis of the quantum cascade effect has been added to the defense database. Future encounters will be more conclusive. Tyrix looked at Vec, her compound eyes reflecting the destruction around them. At least we killed it. At least we. Oh, did you think I was the only one? Araya interrupted, genuine amusement in her failing voice. There are dozens of us out here, waiting in the dark between stars, each with our own unique modifications, our own methods of testing. Your data has already been shared with the entire network. The last stable section of deck beneath them began to tremble. Through the disintegrating walls, Vec could see the Silent Fang beginning to break apart as well, consumed by the same molecular cascade they had triggered. Your species will be remembered, Araya said, her voice fading to a whisper as the ship's final systems failed. Every trap we set, every lure we create will be better because of you. Thank you for your contribution to human naval defense research. The emergency fields finally failed, and the void reached in with hungry fingers. In their last moments, Trix and Vic realized that their greatest mistake hadn't been springing the trap. It had been assuming there was only one.